Hey, it's Kaufman is Alive. I look at comic books new and old. Today I'm looking at a new comic book, a comic book that's revisiting a cartoon from the early 90s, one of my favorite cartoons, Spider-Man from Fox Kids. Really, I think the three best comic book cartoons, maybe the three best just cartoons period of all time, all came out in those early 90s on Fox: Spider-Man, X-Men, and Batman the Animated Series. And I don't really know why Marvel has not revisited Spider-Man, the animated series, in over 30 years. It's really a property they haven't really touched. And so for the first time in over 30 years, we're getting a comic book adaptation to that original cartoon. This is actually continuing the story after the end. Once the series ended after that final episode, this is supposedly continuing the story, but I've got a lot of thoughts about the story, and I got a lot of thoughts about the artwork too. And so thanks again for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't yet, and we'll get into it here. There's a bit of controversy as well about some of the artwork on the interiors here, but I got this great cover by Ron Lim. This is one of the variant covers, and this was one I was really looking out for, and thankfully I was able to pick it up. It's an homage to Ron Lim's own Spider-Man Unlimited #1, part of the Maximum Carnage. And it's got the 94 begins here where the Maximum Carnage begins here was in the original, and we've got Venom in place of Carnage here. And it's the animated series Venom 2, which is really cool. He's got the red and blue shading that he always has on him in the cartoon, and it's got like a corner panel here with a homage to the Fox Kids logo as well, which is really cool. So I love everything about this cover. Great cover. It's got the Spider-Man logo as well that they used for that Fox Kids show. And the creative team on this book, first we got J.M. DeMatteis, and he was one of the original writers of the Spider-Man Fox Kids show. He did some of the episodes, but one of the creators of the original Fox Kids show, John Semper Jr., did have some things to say on his social media about this series that I thought was interesting. This was a few months back after they had announced this series, and you'll see John Semper's name on the credits on probably every single episode of that original animated series, if I had to guess. But he says on his socials, he says, "I got a text message this morning from my good friend Matt Dunford telling me that Marvel is continuing my Spider-Man animated series in comic book form in a 4-issue limited series called Spider-Man 94. Since I will no doubt be asked about it by fans of the series, no, I am not involved with this comic book, and no one at Marvel approached me to be involved in any way. Matt's text message was the first I heard of it. The internet tells me that J.M. DeMatteis is the writer of the comic book, and I have nothing but the greatest respect for him. His amazing body of work over the years in both animation and comic book speaks for itself, and I'm positive this new comic is in great hands. I hired him years ago to participate in writing one episode of my series, which ran for 65 episodes, and I thoroughly enjoyed working with him." Well, there, I stand corrected. He wrote one episode, so. And then he says, where he now chooses to take the series story-wise is entirely his decision, but for the record, they are not my creative choices, nor do they represent any oversight by me. And then he goes on to say, yes, it would have been nice, some might even say respectful, if Marvel had reached out to me at some point as a courtesy, but I have long ago abandoned all expectation that Marvel would acknowledge any of my contributions to the Marvel Universe, like, for instance, my creation of what is now known as the Spider-Verse. And he did create the original Spider-Verse in that animated kids show. There was a multiverse of Spider-Mans that all came together to help Peter Parker. And that was the first time you got a Spider-Verse like that. So he's really not wrong about that. And then he says, so I wish them well and encourage us all to celebrate this good cheer with 30th anniversary year of Spider-Man the Animated Series, and keep your eyes on my socials, especially YouTube, because I intend to launch my own celebration of my series in the very near future. In the immortal words of my mentor, Stan the Man, enough said. Sour grapes, maybe a little bit, but it sounds like he's kind of acknowledging that he understands Marvel's not going to reach out to him at this point, and he's wishing the creators of this new series the best. So I think he just wants a little bit of acknowledgement, and you can't really fault the guy for that. And we got Jim Toe as the artist here. I really like this page here, the title page, and it's got this great villains gallery here on the side. We get all the great Spider-Man villains from the original animated show. And it's cool to see them all there, because the characters that they're using in this series here, almost none of them, except for, Peter's family, that cast of characters, the villains that they're using in this series, none of them ever appeared before in the Spider-Man animated series. So you can see that this series is sort of doing its own thing. And the one thing I was really looking forward to about this series was how they're going to continue the storyline from where the original series ended, with Mary Jane going through a portal and Peter Parker losing her. And unfortunately, we don't get a lot of follow-up. We don't get any answers as to how any of that happened. So again, they're using villains that weren't in the original cartoon, and we're starting from a place in this story that really doesn't continue from the animated series. I'll get into it a little bit more as we get into it, but so for me, this really just kind of feels like some sort of fan fiction in the universe of Spider-Man, the animated series. So the main villain of this series is Morlun, who's this guy here. Really strange opening splash page here where he's in a cocoon. We see a spider attacking its prey, this fly that's trapped in the web here, and he awakens. He comes to his son, who we learn here is Kane. And if you're a fan of the 90s Spider-Man comics, you know Kane was originally a clone of Peter Parker and was a part of the entire clone saga. And cloning is nothing new here in this Spider-Man the Animated Series. In the original Spider-Man Animated Series, we saw Mary Jane turned into a clone and all sorts of other cloning going on. And that's referenced here as well. And this comic book starts off okay. The artwork is all right, but you can kind of right away see some of the strange faces creeping into this comic book here. Some of the far away shots don't look bad at all of the characters, and I actually think when it's just Spider-Man with his mask on, he looks really good. I like the artwork in here by the artist Jim Toe when it's just Spider-Man. But when we get to Peter Parker, you can see he doesn't really look like the animated series Peter Parker much at all. He's kind of lost that jawline there that he had in the original animated series. I mean, he used to look like a hunk. And we've really gone from Greg Brady, seems like, to Mike Brady here with this Spider-Man. And who knows, maybe this is going to turn out to be the clone of Peter Parker or something, and maybe that's why he doesn't look right. That's probably wishful thinking on my end. But we get some dialogue from Peter Parker here, just catching us up on everything that's happened, including the battle with Green Goblin, Mary Jane going through the portal. But then he mentions that she came back and he was able to find her after searching for, he says, months, and facing unspeakable horrors. I've brought you home. And then there's just an asterisk and it says, a tale will tell eventually. And that's all we get. I was really disappointed when I got to this point in the book, finding out that we don't get, this isn't the story of how Peter found Mary Jane or any of that. We've just kind of moved on past that point. And now Mary Jane is asking Peter to marry her. But he has cold feet because the last time that they got married, she turned out to be a clone and died, and he doesn't want to go through all that torment and trauma again. But she's offended by this. And we see Kane watching Spider-Man here on the rooftop ledge. We just get this quick page introducing us to Ezekiel Sims, part of the Sims Foundation here. And if you remember Ezekiel Sims, he was the bad guy from the Madam Web movie. So I think that's pretty funny they're using him here. A very minor character in the comics. He was never in the animated series that I can ever remember, but we just learned that he's got this foundation here that's trying to stop world hunger and do all these other things, you know, broker peace, end climate change. And the feed cuts out when he's talking to all these like board members here, and they're all just like, what happened? What happened? And one guy just says, well, if we know one thing about Ezekiel Sims, it's that he's unpredictable. So that's all we really learn about Ezekiel Sims here in this issue. And then Moreland said, or actually Kane says to Moreland, he says, we can reboot Sims later. So apparently this maybe is a clone or something, because later on we find out Moreland is really into cloning here. And he's kind of like a vampire. He has to feed off of other creatures, and so Kane has trapped Vermin here. So we get this cameo from the Spider-Man villain Vermin, who again was never in the original animated series. And he attacks Moreland, but then Moreland just eats him. However he does that. They don't really show it, but then we go to Aunt May's house here, and again we get all the characters. They're in their, you know, original clothes that they're always in from the animated show, which is good. I mean, that's a good touch. I'm glad that they do that. But MJ goes to confront Peter about him not wanting to marry her here. And then he just says he's got this trauma, and he watched you die. He doesn't want to see it happen again. But she says that, don't you think I feel the same way about you being Spider-Man? Our love's bigger than that. And she asks him to marry him again. This time he says yes. And then we get the pages that have been memed everywhere. They've been shared everywhere, all over social medias. It's pretty much this panel right here of Spider-Man and Mary Jane. Although they're not really the only derpy looking faces that you're going to find. But I don't know what the artist was thinking here with this face. I mean, it looks more like Aunt May than Peter. And Mary Jane's face doesn't look any better there with the expression she's got. So again, I don't know what the artist was really thinking there, but that's not it. But then when you get to the Spider-Man action, I think this stuff looks pretty good. He starts battling Molten Man. We just kind of get an excuse for some action. Spider-Man says he's put Molten Man away multiple times. I like this panel here too. I love that pose Spider-Man's in. The panel above it too, his spider sense goes off. That looks very reminiscent of the cartoon. And we see Kane watching Spider-Man there. I like how he's even on this panel in the background. You can barely see him. But you even notice someone is watching Kane in the background as well here in both of these panels on another rooftop. And that does not get brought up again in this comic. So I found that pretty interesting. So Peter and Mary Jane, they're having dinner with Aunt Anna and Aunt May, and they're announcing that they're getting married. Of course, Aunt Anna is not too pleased about this. She doesn't like Peter. And then his spider sense goes off again, and Kane busts through the window. Not a bad splash page until you look closely at some of these faces again, like Aunt May's face. Just, her eyes are like so far apart. Mary Jane doesn't look that much better either. But I like Kane. He looks cool. He says he wants Peter. He says his father wants you, Peter. He calls him a totem. And Peter fights him outside, and they start battling on the rooftops. Peter shows up as Spider-Man after disappearing for about 5 or 10 seconds. as he would do in the cartoon as well. And none of his family know that he is Spider-Man yet either, so he's still trying to keep that a secret. And Kane reveals that Morlun is the name of his father. He calls Spider-Man pathetic. And then we get one of those great dramatic speeches that Spider-Man gives in every episode here as he makes his big comeback. So I really like that. That reminded me a lot of the cartoon in the way it's written. And somehow Peter, thinking about Mary Jane and everything being taken away from him, this somehow like psychically connects Kane to Peter or something. And so he starts having these like visions of Mary Jane as well. Kane does, and it makes him run off, and he doesn't understand what's going on or what that was. And then the police return Peter, and he's just explaining that he was a few blocks away. And Peter explains, he thought kidnapping me would draw Spider-Man out, but Spidey saved us. He saved me. And Anna starts giving it to Peter, but that's when Mary Jane just tells her to shut up. So at the end here, Anna and Mary Jane are kind of drifting apart here because of the way she feels about Peter. And then we see Morlun. He's disappointed in Kane, so he just steals all of his life force here and leaves him for dead, which shows what kind of guy he is. And he says he'll just have to deal with Spider-Man personally. And we see he's growing all these other clones here in his laboratory. So we do get a letter here as well from the editor. And I brought this up in my new Comic Book Day video already, but he does bring up how he says, if you thought you knew who Ezekiel Sims, Morlun, and Kane were, think again. Just like the original Spider-Man 94, you can't always expect where the storyline is going based on comics. Heck, Hobgoblin came before the Green Goblin on the show. How wild was that? So yeah, even though this is Kane, you know, perhaps there's he's a different character, and Morlun's origin perhaps could be different here as well. There was a lot of things different in that original cartoon. There's some differences between some of these characters in the cartoon than in the comics. Like, for instance, Chameleon was the son of the Red Skull in the cartoon here, and I'm not sure if that was ever a thing in the comics. The Smythe character as well, who was like the sidekick to Kingpin, had a very prominent role in the cartoon as well. So again, the writers are just kind of doing their own thing here. It doesn't really feel too connected to the cartoon in a sense that, you know, they've just blown past that cliffhanger from the original animated cartoon, which was my kind of whole reason for wanting to pick up this comic book. But there was a couple things in here that did intrigue me with the actual plot of this issue, involving Kane and whoever the guy is that's stalking Kane, and just what they want with Peter. I wonder if we're going to find out, like in the original comics, that this Peter is actually a clone. So we'll see. I think I probably will continue to pick up this series, even though I think they probably could have gotten some better artwork in this book. Maybe if they had gotten Ron Lim to do the artwork, that would have been pretty great. I'm not trying to dog on Jim Toe at all. There's some pretty good panels in here, some good pages, even though I think when he's trying to draw some of the faces, the human faces from the cartoon, they just don't look quite right. But I like some of the action shots and some of the drawings of Spider-Man here. But it's just a cartoon adaptation, so I don't know what people, were really expecting, like some Jim Lee artwork in here or anything. I can't really recommend this book, though. I really like this cover. I think there's some great variant covers coming out for this series, but overall, the story, take it or leave it as an adaptation. It doesn't really seem needed, and like I said, doesn't really explain anything that happened at the end of the animated series. So that's all I got today. Thanks again for watching. Hope you guys have a great Saturday morning. Hope you put some cartoons on, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Go read comics.